On July 20th, in 1969, at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, American astronaut Neil Armstrong, 240,000 miles from Earth, speaks these words to more than a billion people listening at home. Quote, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," unquote. Stepping off the lunar landing module Eagle, Armstrong became the first human to walk on the surface of the moon. The American effort to send astronauts to the moon has its origins in a famous appeal our 35th president, John F. Kennedy, made to a special joint session of Congress on May 25th in 1961. Quote, "I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." At the time, our country was still trailing the Soviet Union in space developments, and Cold War-era America welcomed Kennedy's bold proposal. In 1966, after 5 years of work by an international team of scientists and engineers, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, conducted the first unmanned Apollo mission, testing the structural integrity of the proposed launch vehicle and spacecraft combination. Then, on January 27th, in 1967, tragedy struck at Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, when a fire broke out during a manned launch pad test of Apollo spacecraft and Saturn rocket. 3 astronauts continued their eternity on this day. Despite the setback, NASA and its thousands of employees forged ahead. In October of 1968, Apollo 7, the first manned Apollo mission, orbited Earth and successfully tested many of the sophisticated systems needed to conduct a moon journey and landing. In December of the same year, Apollo 8 took 3 astronauts to the far side of the moon and back. And in March 1969, Apollo 9 tested the lunar module for the first time while in Earth orbit. Then in May, the 3 astronauts of Apollo 10 took the first complete Apollo spacecraft around the moon in a dry run for the scheduled July landing mission. At 9:32 a.m. on July 16th, with the world watching, Apollo 11 took off from Kennedy Space Center with astronauts Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin Jr., and Michael Collins aboard. Armstrong, a 38-year-old research pilot, was the commander of the mission. After traveling 240,000 miles in 76 hours, Apollo 11 entered into a lunar orbit on July 19th. The next day, at 1:46 p.m., the lunar module Eagle, manned by Armstrong and Aldrin, separated from the command module where Collins remained. 2 hours later, the Eagle began its descent to the lunar surface, and at 4:18 p.m., the craft touched down on the southwestern edge of the Sea of Tranquility. Armstrong immediately radioed to Mission Control in Houston, Texas, a famous message. Quote, "The Eagle has landed," unquote. At 10:39 p.m., 5 hours ahead of the original schedule, Armstrong opened the hatch of the lunar module. As he made his way down the lunar module's ladder, a television camera attached to the craft recorded his progress and beamed the signal back to Earth, where hundreds of millions watched in great anticipation. At 10:56 p.m., Armstrong spoke his famous quote, which he later contended was slightly garbled by his microphone and meant to be, quote, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," unquote. He then planted his left foot on the gray, powdery surface, took a cautious step forward, and humanity had walked on the moon. Buzz Aldrin joined him on the moon's surface at 11:11 p.m., and together they took photographs of the terrain, planted a U.S. flag, ran a few simple scientific tests, and spoke with our 37th president, Richard M. Nixon, via Houston. By 1:11 a.m. on July 21st, both astronauts were back on the lunar module, and the hatch was closed. The two men slept that night on the surface of the moon, and at 1:54 p.m., the Eagle began its ascent back to the command module. Among the items left on the surface of the moon was a plaque that read, quote, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot on the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind," unquote. At 5:35 p.m., Armstrong and Aldrin successfully docked and rejoined Collins, and at 12:56 a.m. on July 22nd, Apollo 11 began its journey home, safely splashing down in the Pacific Ocean at 12:51 p.m. on July 24th. There would be 5 more successful lunar landing missions and 1 unplanned lunar swing by Apollo 13. The last men to walk on the moon, astronauts Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt of the Apollo 17 mission, left the lunar surface on December 14th in 1972. The Apollo program was a costly and labor-intensive endeavor involving an estimated 400,000 engineers, technicians, and scientists, and costing $24 billion, close to $100 billion in today's dollars. The expense was justified by Kennedy's 1961 mandate to beat the Soviets to the moon. And after the feat was accomplished, ongoing missions lost their viability. On July 20th in 1963, the awesome actor and awesome martial arts expert Bruce Lee continued his eternity. Jun Fun Bruce Lee was born on November 27th in 1940 in San Francisco, California. At the time, his father, a Chinese opera star, was on tour in the U.S. The family moved back to Hong Kong in 1941. Growing up, Lee was a child actor who appeared in some 20 Chinese films. He also studied dancing and trained in the Wing Chun style of Kung Fu, also known as Kung Fu. In 1959, Lee returned to America, where he eventually attended the University of Washington and opened a martial arts school in Seattle. In 1964, Lee married Linda Emery, who in 1965 gave birth to Brandon Lee. In 1966, the Lees moved to Los Angeles, and Bruce appeared on the television program The Green Hornet, playing the Hornet's acrobatic sidekick, Kato. Lee also appeared in karate tournaments around the United States and continued to teach martial arts to private clients, including the actor Steve McQueen. In search of better acting roles than Hollywood was offering, Lee returned to Hong Kong in the early 1970s and successfully established himself as a star in Asia with the action movies The Big Boss in 1971 and The Way of the Dragon in 1972, which he wrote, directed, and starred in. Lee's next film, Enter the Dragon, was released in the United States by Hollywood studio Warner Brothers in August of 1973. Lee continued his eternity a month earlier on July 20th. However, Enter the Dragon was a box office hit, eventually grossing more than $200 million, and Lee posthumously became a movie icon in America. On July 20th in 1976, on the 7th anniversary of the Apollo 11 lunar landing, the Viking 1 lander, an unmanned U.S. planetary probe, successfully lands on the surface of Mars. Viking 1 was launched on August 20th in 1975 and arrived at Mars on June 19th in 1976. The first month of its orbit was devoted to imaging the surface to find appropriate landing sites. On July 20th in 1976, the Viking 1 lander separated from the orbiter, touched down on the Planitia region of Mars, and sent back the first close-up photographs of the rust-colored Martian surface. In September of 1976, Viking 2 launched only 3 weeks after Viking 1 entered into orbit around Mars, where it assisted Viking 1 in imaging the surface and also sent down a lander. During the dual Viking missions, the two orbiter imaged the entire surface of Mars at a resolution of 150 to 300 meters, and the two landers sent back more than 1,400 images of the planet's surface. On July 20th, in 1977, a flash flood hits Johnstown, Pennsylvania. This flood came 88 years after the infamous Johnstown Great Flood of 1889. Just as they had in the first flood, the dams in the Conemaugh Valley failed, bringing disaster to the town. The flood occurred when an extraordinary amount of rain came down in the Conemaugh Valley in a short period of time. Nearly 12 inches were measured in 10 hours. The National Weather Service later estimated that this amount of rain in that location should happen less than once every 1,000 years. The largest dam that burst was at Laurel Run. This 10-year-old earthen dam held back 100 million gallons of water. Despite having a 42-foot high spillway, the dam failed, and the resulting flood devastated the town of Tanneryville. 5 other dams in the area also burst, releasing another 30 million gallons of water over the landscape. The failure of the dams came as a big surprise. Johnstown had constructed an entire system designed to completely eliminate flood risk. In addition, regular inspections had turned up no defects. Still, the dams were no match for the thunderstorm that stalled over the area on July 20th. 84 people continued their eternity on this day, and $300 million in damages were suffered, and hundreds of people lost their homes. Our 39th president, Jimmy Carter, declared the region a federal disaster area, and the National Guard was sent to assist in relief efforts. Despite millions spent to rehabilitate the Johnstown area, the economy never recovered. The city's population decreased nearly 15% in the aftermath of the flood, as people moved away to rebuild their lives elsewhere. All historic information divulged and documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com.